Hi everyone, great to meet you. Uh, Here is the countdown to the presentation. We wait for a couple of more people. Feel free to write down in the chat where are you from. I'm from Krakow, Poland. I see somebody from Australia. Great. That's a dedication. What time is it in Australia, Glenn? Ready 64. Great. All right, I see some advanced basic syntax here. Nice. We are loading, exactly. Right, Italy. Croatia, nice. Tastrup, Denmark. Let me know, Thomas, if I pronounce it at least not that incorrect. All right, we'll start the presentation when the bomb goes off. We won't wait for anyone, so don't worry. If you are here, that's great. If you will wait till the end, that's even better. I'm going to show you what's so special about Commodore 64, why it's been alive for those 40 years, and what can we do to keep it alive for the 40 next years, so that our children and maybe grandchildren can also enjoy Commodore 64. How cool would that be? Exactly. There's something special about Commodore 64. All right, I was close enough with pronunciation. Great. This is some serious hacking going on here. Is it an interrupt address? Or do I not remember it correctly? I might not remember that correctly. I'm using my own video lessons to remind myself about the addresses of Commodore 64, where to change the number of, where to enable sprites, where to disable some stuff. And we are on time. So let's start with the presentation. I will stop sharing this screen and I will share my sprites. This will give you time to join us. Give me a second. This one, and I need to share the audio. That's important. All right, I started learning assembly 20 years ago. Was worth it. I started learning it 6 years ago, and I agree. All right, I see that you are ready. So let's start. First, a couple of things. If you have any question about the slides, if you have any comments about the slides, feel free to type in the comments and talk with others in the chat. I will do my best to read your messages. And if I see a question that I can answer during the presentation, I'll try to do that. If not, we will get back to those questions at the end of the presentation. You don't need to take notes. You don't need to take screenshots. The event will be recorded and I will give you a link. Let me type it real quick in the chat. If you registered for the event, then you are good to go. You will receive the link to the replay in the email, probably tomorrow. If not, go to this website, 64bytes.com/40, as 40 years of Commodore 64, and register there, and you will receive the replay and all the slides. So, what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to show you why Commodore 64 is so beloved by pretty much everyone on the planet. Maybe not everyone on the planet, but by a lot of people. And what's so special about it? Why is that it is still alive? And who keeps it alive? And more importantly, what can we do to keep it alive for for the next 40 years? All right, so let's start. We live in a remarkable time, right? Our computers are fast and we are more productive than ever, right? But there's something wrong with this message, because our apps get slower. Whenever a couple of years pass, I need to update my phone because it gets slower. And yeah, applications get more beautiful, but everything gets slower. We need to still buy new computers and buy new devices. Why is that? Our websites get huge. It's hard to download everything. Everything gets slower. Everything gets more expensive to develop, to download, and so on. And no one cares about the old hardware. By old, what I mean 3, 4, or 5 years old. We need to update our computers or phones in this time frame. And some people know what's going on, because this makes me think about a certain 40-year-old computer. Meet Commodore 64. Probably most of you know what Commodore 64 is, but if not, then Commodore 64 is this beauty. This is one of the versions of Commodore 64. It's called the bread bin because it looks like a bread bin. There was also C64C, which is the flatter version of Commodore 64, but it's basically the same computer. And most important thing, well, one of the most important facts about Commodore 64 is that it's highest selling single computer model of all time. That's true. It's a actual Guinness World Record. So maybe iPad would outsell the Commodore 64, but iPad is not a real computer, so Commodore 64 is still highest selling single computer model of all time. Look at those stats. 1 megahertz CPU. It's probably 1,000 or maybe 10,000 only. Couple of thousand slower than your phone, the device that you keep in your pocket. It has plenty of RAM, 64 kilobytes. It's about 8 times more than Bill Gates assumed that anyone would ever need. It's plenty of RAM. And it has 8-bit registers. That's great. Unfortunately, it's not produced for more than 20 years. But fortunately, 68 games and 41 demos has been released for that computer in total. Last year. And there are no microtransactions. That's true. Only last year, there were 68 games and 41 demos. If we take a look at previous years, we can see that at least 60 games were released every year, and around 40 demos has been released every single year. And when I say games or demos, I mean like super productions for Commodore 64. When you count all releases, then it looks like that. We count them in thousands, and you can clearly see that we release more stuff every year for Commodore 64. So those releases are pretty much everything. So any music, any sound, any small games, any small demos, effects, intros, outros, anything that is released and the data is taken from CSDB. So there are probably plenty of stuff that is not released to the world, or at least not released to the CSDB. So there is plenty of stuff released every year for Commodore 64. On top of that, there are many successful crowdfunding campaigns. For example, do you know this guy? I will disable the banner, sorry for that. Okay, so he's Sam Dyer, known as Mr. Seed, and he created this beautiful book, Commodore 64, a visual compendium. And this is the first of the series of games that has been released by a company created by Mr. Seed. He's now publishing a lot of different books about retro computers, and this is amazing. It started with one Kickstarter campaign. And that's not all. Do you know this guy? It is hard to find any information about him, but he made something amazing. He found original molds for C64C, which is this flatter version of Commodore 64, and he made a Kickstarter campaign to create new housings for the computer. And thanks to him and thanks to his effort, we now have new original Commodore 64 housings for our computers. We have Steve and Don Fletcher. Steve created a documentary about the Commodore, the company, and people who are creating stuff for Commodore 64, who took part in creating the computer, creating games for the computer then and now. Amazing. Steve also created his own game for Commodore 64, a childhood dream come true. And there is also a new hardware. One of the most known is the Ultimate 2 Plus. The full name is Ultimate 1541, which is the name of the disk drive. So this cartridge can emulate the disk drive, can emulate the dataset, which is the tape recorder attached to Commodore 64. It can also write directly to the memory. It can you can connect to it via LAN with your PC and send programs directly to this cartridge and then see them immediately on your Commodore 64. It has plenty of other different features. It's basically amazing. There are also modems for Commodore 64. This one is an example. It plugs into one of the in the expansion port, which can be also used as a joystick adapter. Some people use Commodore 64 as an Arduino and experiment with different hardware stuff and connect Commodore 64 to weird PCBs and do some crazy stuff with it. Amazing. There is C64 Ultimate, which is not only a mainboard for Commodore 64, but this is a hardware emulation for Commodore 64, plus it includes all the features of the Ultimate cartridge. So if you don't have the original Commodore 64, you can buy this one and you can run almost every game and almost every demo on this machine. If you don't fancy emulation and want real hardware, you can get this thing. This is C64 Reloaded, and this is modern motherboard for Commodore 64. If you have original chips, you can plug them into those sockets, plug in a modern power supply with 20 volts instead of 9, and you can have a new Commodore 64 with the same old chips. So no hardware emulation, but part of the hardware that will help your computer to survive a bit more. People still use Commodore 64 in unexpected ways. I don't know if you've seen this computer and this picture. It was famous a couple of years ago. It is made in one machine shop in Poland where this guy lives. He's called Jerzy Zygmunt. I met him a couple of years ago. He lives in Gdańsk and works in Gdańsk, and he is specializing in not suspension but something similar. I think I'm not sure, but it's related to wheels in trucks, and he has a machine that needs to be configured with different kinds of parameters, and he still uses to this day his original Commodore 64. The Commodore 64 is pretty much always on. It has one basic program turned on, and this basic program is used to calculate those parameters for this machine that he uses to operate and calculate the stuff he needs. So this one is an extreme case, but all in all, people love Commodore 64, and I am among them. This is my story. So I was one of those people who grew up with Commodore 64. One trivia about me: I'm younger than the computer. I was born in 1994, and back then I was only playing games and typing in basic programs, and thanks to Commodore 64 I became a programmer. So right now you may know me as a founder of 64bytes.com, where I teach how to program Commodore 64 in BASIC and assembly. I create video tutorials, and you can find me on pretty much any social media as Michał T, written this way so that English speakers can pronounce my name. And programming Commodore 64 is among the best hobbies I've ever had. So this is how I started, and probably if you grew up with Commodore 64, this is how you started, right? So this is the program that you can find in the manual. You write 10 print a string, hello Commodore 64, or your name, or some dirty word, as you would do as a child, and then you write 20 go to 10, and you have an endless loop printing text on the screen. It will run endlessly or until you press run stop on the keyboard. But this is how I stayed. When I was younger, I didn't have access to any books or even internet, so I didn't know how to learn how to write an assembly. But a couple of years ago, I gave it a try, and apparently it's not that hard, but it's really rewarding, because in assembly you can make more interesting stuff, your programs run faster, you are closer to the actual machine, and it's just fun. So, getting back to stats, Commodore 64 has a plenty of resolution, a lot of screen space, 320 by 200 pixels. How much is that? When you take a look at the previous generation of iPhone and you look at the screen, this is the Commodore 64. And the actual 320 by 200 pixels is just this area, where you dark blue area, and this thing around it is a border. So the border is needed to have some kind of a safe space where you can display images, you can display graphics, and you are pretty much sure that it won't be hidden by some frame of one of the various TV sets that were available at the moment. So if you run this on the real TV, like cathode ray tube TV, it might look like this. So part of the border will be hidden, and depending on the television you have, the more of it can be hidden or the more of it can be revealed. So that's not an old concept, and it's not forgotten. When we have our phones, We have this notch thing, we have something displayed on the screen, and we still have the safe area. So if you develop the applications for iPhone, you need to take this frame around the screen into account, just like on the Commodore 64. When it comes to colors, Commodore 64 has plenty of them, 16. It has a fixed palette of 16 colors, but to make things complicated, you cannot use all of them at the same time everywhere. And Commodore 64 has weird bitmaps. When you have bitmaps displayed on any other computer, the addressing mode is such that the memory is aligned row by row. So if you want to go to the pixel in the middle of the screen, you divide the width by 2, you divide the height by 2, and you find coordinates, you go there, and you have the pixel. On Commodore 64, bitmaps are actually built of characters, 8 by 8 blocks, and bitmaps are built this way. First we have all the rows of the first character, then all the rows for the second character, all the rows for the third character, and so on and so on. So it's quite complicated to port algorithms for drawing to Commodore 64 because there is a bit more computation with that. And there are some constraints when it comes to colors. For example, when you are in the high resolution mode, so you have all the pixels to your disposition, 320 by 200, you can use only 2 colors per one character block. So in this character block you can use 2 colors, one for foreground, second for background, and here you can use another 2, they can be different ones for the foreground and the background. And in some images you can see those areas when one character starts and the other ends. So for example, here you can see some rectangles where there are different colors. But really good artists can go around those limitations and create images that are also in high-res mode, but you cannot find any boundaries between characters. There is also a high-res character mode, not high-res bitmap mode, which is a bit different. It's mostly used for games, and you can achieve beautiful games like Ultima here in this mode. If you don't need so much horizontal resolution, you can use multicolor mode, which gives you 4 colors in one character block, but only half the resolution in horizontal space. So your pixels get wider, but they can be more colorful. And in this mode you can create images like this one, or even this one. So people try to get around those limitations, try to get more resolution, try to get more colors. And how do they do that? Let's see all the 16 colors of Commodore 64 ordered by luminance. And if we display them vertically like that, and then if we turn it around and display them horizontally, and we switch quickly between those images, on the TV, they will look more or less like that. So we will achieve, we will get more shades of colors by interlacing images, so blinking them every other frame. And thanks to hacks like that, we have plenty of different so-called enhanced modes for Commodore 64. So graphical modes that were not designed by the designers of the Commodore 64, but created by artists and programmers. One of the most famous one is called FLI, or Flexible Line Interpretation, and it's a hack. The basic idea is that when the graphical chip fetches a row of characters and fetches colors for this row of characters, it still cycles from the CPU. So if you try to execute your program at the same time while the graphical chip is busy fetching those colors, then you have less time for your program. And that's why, and it happens on specific raster lines, every 8 raster lines when you don't do anything suspicious. So those lines are usually called bad lines because you have less cycles to work with. But if you make a hack and tell the computer to execute those bad lines on every raster line instead of every 8th raster line, you will lose a lot of cycles on each raster line, but you will get more colors. Instead of getting this constraint that you can only have 2 colors per 1 character or 8x8 pixel block, you will get the constraint of 2 colors per 1 slice of the character. So only 8 pixels with one or 2 colors, and below you get 2 new colors for another slice of 8 pixels. So you get 8 more colors for your image with that. And if you use the IFLI image format, it's called interlaced flexible line interpretation, which means you have 2 flea images and you interlace them or display them every frame. So you get more shades of colors and more colors because of this hack. There are also other different modes, like super high-res mode, which, if I remember correctly, uses sprites, which are movable bitmaps, to underlay or overlay the characters visible on the screen and give them more colors or more resolution. So you can display, for example, multicolor image, but overlay high-res sprites and add some details that are only 1 pixel wide instead of 2 pixels wide. And there are plenty of other different modes that allow you to do extreme stuff on Commodore 64. So this is an example of the flea image. This is another one. So if you make a close-up, you can see that in some parts it uses more colors that it should use in this specific mode, without this hack of creating bad lines on every line. So when it comes to sprites, as newer machines right now have accelerated polygons and can create virtual three-dimensional worlds, Commodore 64 has hardware accelerated sprites, which are movable bitmaps. This is just a block of pixels, 24 by 21, with 1 color and the background. So you either display a sprite or not. So it can be semi-transparent. You can have also multicolor sprites, which allows 2 additional colors. And you can stretch them and do a couple of other stuff. But basically, you can have only 8 of them. So this is what you would expect from a sprite. So this graphic in this game is displayed with a special character mode called Extended Background Color Mode. And this is a high-resolution sprite. This is another example of the high-resolution sprite. It looks like that. But if you display sprites in different modes, like multicolor and high-resolution sprite, and even overlay one on top of the other, you can create a really beautiful and colorful characters that not only have multiple colors, but can have finer details. So for example, this Gianna character or Maria character, I'm not sure which one is it, but she is constructed from 3 sprites. This is example of a modern game. This is Brightly Witch Chronicles by Sarah Jane Ivory. So all of that is most likely displayed by characters and this different character graphics, and most likely the characters and some other NPCs are displayed with sprites. This is another example of the game, which is not modern by modern standards, but still when it was released, it pushed the boundary of what is possible on Commodore 64. First of all, we can see that we have multicolor sprites with thin borders, and this is achieved by overlaying a high-resolution sprite on top of the multicolor sprite. So we have a border and color. Also, in this game, there is like really fast scrolling that is achieved because of the specific hack that is possible on Commodore 64, because normally Commodore 64 can move a screen quite slowly, 1 pixel at a time, up to 7 pixels, and then you copy data on the screen. But with some clever hacking, you can scroll stuff a bit more. This is another example of not that complicated graphics, but really well designed animations. So it uses plenty of frames for each sprite, so it gives you the idea that the character is actually running. So it's almost like what you would see in Prince of Persia or another game like that. This is another important game, Total Eclipse. So this game is displaying a completely three-dimensional world built out of polygons. So it is more 3D than Doom. In Doom you couldn't look up or down and the enemies were actually sprites. Duke Nukem was almost completely three-dimensional, but enemies were sprites, and only Quake allowed you to look up and down, and every object in that game was an actual polygon. So this game is older, and this game was in complete 3D when it was released. Well, that's true. It runs a bit slow. You count it in seconds per frame, not frames per second, but still, it's Commodore 64. And one important thing is that Commodore 64 has no bugs, only features. One example is that the SID chip of the Commodore 64 has a specific bug in that, in itself. I'm not sure exactly what is that, because I'm not well versed in electronics, but maybe it's something about grounding or something about emitting current. But the fact is, when you change the volume of the output of the SID chip, you can hear a ticking sound, like a tick when you move volume up or down, and this ticking sound is proportional to the volume. So if you change the volume pretty quickly, you can sample music, or you can create a speech synthesis. And one example of speech synthesis is in the Impossible Mission, and if I plugged the audio correctly, you should be able to hear that.
Another visitor. Stay a while. Stay forever.
Another visitor. Stay a while, stay forever. So this is one example of what you can achieve, and this is important because Commodore 64 is not built to make samples and not built to play music. It cannot even generate a sine wave. It can generate like a saw wave, triangle wave, or a rectangle wave with pulse width modulation and noise. And that's basically it. But with clever hacking and a lot of knowledge about the signal processing, you can create something like this one. So this is actual Prodigy song running on Commodore 64, which is amazing. So this is an example of displaying 8 sprites. Oh no, there are more of them. There are hundreds of them. So how it's possible? So this is extreme case. Usually when you want to display more than 8 sprites, you can use those movable bitmaps, display them on specific raster line, and once they are displayed and raster line goes down, you move pointers of those bitmaps and move them down. So then you can display 8 more sprites. And you can do that dynamically by sorting those sprites and doing some kind of magic stuff. It's called multiplexing. And normally in games you can achieve like 24 sprites, maybe 40, but in demos you can go up to 140. And this demo also uses another hack that allows you to draw smaller sprites, because normally when you display 21 pixels of the sprite, you cannot display any other until this one is being displayed. But you can hack around it. And there is another demo created by LFT. So this guy is amazing, but if you don't know what's happening here, you cannot appreciate how amazing is that. So LFT is a Linus Ackerson. You can find him on the internet, and he has a blog post about what he has done in this demo. And basically he took the hack from this thing, but made it pretty dynamic, and it allowed him to display those sprites. So it's usually more impressive if you actually know what he managed to do. If not, then other demos will impress you more. Probably this game might impress you more because it displays quite a lot of sprites, like a huge sprite here with a lot of different colors and high resolution details. Some probably sprites here that are those bullets, and also we have some sprites displayed over the border. What's happening here? Well, this is the multiplexing coming in practice. So this guy here is created from multiple different sprites. Here we have a row of different sprites, so we never can have more than 8 sprites here. And here those numbers are also displayed on maximum 8 sprites. So the border can be opened, and it's easier to open the top and the bottom of the border because this is the hack that you need to execute only once per frame. Basically, Commodore 64 can make the border wider or thinner, and it checks if the border has started being drawn at only one of those places. And if you make the border thinner, and the Commodore 64, the graphical chip is right here, and it checks, should I display the border here? And the answer is not, so it doesn't. So it doesn't start drawing the border. And then here you execute small program and you switch the flip the switch, make the border wider. Then Commodore 64, the graphical chip, runs here and asks, oh, should I start displaying the border? Is it set to be thin one? And it checks the memory. No, it's not. Oh, so I don't need to do that. And it doesn't actually start drawing the border. And that's how you do it. You need to do it on every frame. And that's how you open the top and the bottom part of the border. In the horizontal frame, unfortunately, you need to do it on every raster line, which is quite tedious, and because of that, it's not that common in games. This is another example of a game that is modern. It has been released like 2 years ago or something like that, and it's amazing. Just look at this animation, look at those colors, look at this graphic design, look at the scrolling. It isn't supposed to be possible on Commodore 64, but still, it is. It's one of the most beautiful games released on Commodore 64, in my opinion, and I think if it has been released 40 years ago, then the history of Nintendo could look quite different. And when it comes to modern demos, I don't even know where to start. I'm gonna show you a couple of my favorite examples, and this should be interesting. Remember, 64 bytes of RAM, 1 MHz CPU, and 3-dimensional graphics, constructed geometry effects. What is even happening here? What's going on? Alright, I know what you're saying. 3-dimensional objects but without any shadows. That's kind of lame, right? Right. This demo shows you shadows. So you can see a shaded cube that has a shadow. It looks like Commodore 64 has hardware accelerated graphics with stencil buffers, but it doesn't have that. It's actually an old computer, so how is that even possible? And this is my favorite. Yeah, I just don't want to spoil anything. It just looks awesome. Other world to explore and whole other world to discover when it comes to this computer. So Commodore 64 is apparently alive and well, and the question is, who keeps it alive? I have a handful of people that I picked. There are plenty of more. One of them is Sarah Jane Ivory, who releases games for Commodore 64, Briley Witch Chronicles, which is the RPG game in the style of Zelda, Soul Force and Zeta Wing, which are shooters, Paul Kohler, who releases demakes for Commodore 64, so he takes famous games like Cannabalt or Super Breadbox, Luftrausers, and creates a Commodore 64 versions of them. Right now he's working on Spelunky for Commodore 64. I can't wait to see what how does it even look. I'm amazed what he's able to achieve with Commodore 64. Antonio is working on the Pig's Quest, Epic Quest, which is a platformer, and or maybe adventure game. I'm not exactly sure. I was only following his talk when he talks about what he achieved in this game. If I remember correctly, he uses a bitmap mode to draw graphics and uses it in really impressive ways. And so we can find the presentation about this game and learn quite a lot about what's possible on Commodore 64. Gregory created an operating system for Commodore 64, a new one. So we had Geos or Geos. I don't know the pronunciation. We had the Final 3 cartridge, which also had a Windows-based system, and he created a modern operating system for Commodore 64. There is Lukasz, who creates music on Commodore 64 and not only on our beloved machine. There is Marcin Skoczylas, known as Slajerek, who created the best debugger for Commodore 64 and Atari and Nintendo. So this debugger allows you to have a real-time view of pretty much everything inside your Commodore 64. Well, inside the emulator of the Commodore 64. So you can take a look at the memory map in real time. You can change it in real time. You can take a look at sprites, characters, what SID chip is doing at the moment. You can edit it, and plenty of other stuff. You can also rewind it. So you can work on a demo, rewind it, and see what happened at this exact CPU cycle. It's amazing. There is also Sosowski, who's a game developer, and he inspired me to go into programming Commodore 64. He took part in one of the game jams, and he created Pong, which is a variation of the Pong game, which is quite devious because it's a two-player game and the ball changes its speed when one or the other or two players press the fire buttons. It's quite hard. But the game, the source code of the game fits on one image. And you can take a look at it and get an idea on how to make games on Commodore 64 in assembly. And there are other people. When I prepared for this presentation, I asked some of you for your photos from your childhood or from modern times, and some of you sent me those photos, and here they are. So some of you are taking care of new generations of Commodore 64 enthusiasts. Some of you collect old computers. Some of you hack on them. Matthew here didn't grow up with Commodore 64, but he got interested with Commodore 64 when he saw the C64 Maxi, and then he got hooked up, and he is a part of our community to this day. Some of the people grew up with Commodore 64 and cannot grow out of it. And most importantly, of all the people who keep the Commodore 64 alive, you keep the Commodore 64 alive. You who are watching this presentation live, who are attending the events, who are watching replays of the events, you are learning about Commodore 64. Maybe you are attending live events like those people, and you meet with other Commodore 64 enthusiasts. You still keep your hardware. Maybe you just have nice t-shirts, and some people who are interested in Commodore 64 can say hi to you and thanks that you keep it alive. And there are many of you, and that's great. So when I gave this talk a couple of months ago live, we were celebrating the 40th birthday of Commodore 64 by singing happy birthday to this computer. I won't do that today because I would be the only person recorded on the camera, but we can celebrate it in a different way. We can make something for this beauty. And I would like to invite you to a challenge. So let's make something interesting for Commodore 64 this year. And this can be something small, maybe an image in any different graphical mode, maybe some Petsky graphics, maybe a game or a effect or a demo or an intro or a zip file, or maybe a tool that will help others create something interesting. So I would like to invite you to do something interesting for Commodore 64. Please don't make us sing. Okay, that's right. Yes, people I didn't mention are one of the most important people, are our beloved demo sceners who keep the Commodore 64 alive. Thanks to you, we have the most active demo scene community among any other retro computer. Thank you. I'm glad that I can experience your demos and I can strive to be almost as good as maybe half of you someday. But regardless of your abilities, I would like to invite you to create something. And I can help some of you. So let me know if you want to know how can I help you. And I'll drink some water and try to read your comments. Yes, after the presentation, tomorrow I will send email to everybody who registered, and you will get all their names of the demos on slides. How much work went in those demos? Man hours, plenty of them. All right, are you ready to continue? Do you want to know how can I help you to create something cool for Commodore 64 and keep this computer alive? Let me know in the comments. Or should we end it here? Those are comments, I think that you added them during the demos. Yes, I agree, those are insane. All right, you want me to continue? So I will. Okay, so I've been learning how to program Commodore 64 since 2014. And while I was learning new techniques and learning a bit of assembly, I recorded what I learned and created a series of short videos called 64 bytes. There are more than 100 of them, and they are ordered logically. So if you go from the episode 1 to episode 100, you will most likely learn quite a lot about programming Commodore 64, how to display sprites, how to open borders, how to display different graphical modes, how to play music, how to play sounds, how to display hundreds of sprites maybe, and plenty of different stuff. So you can think of it as a long tutorial created of short videos, or a library of techniques, because you can jump into one lesson, watch it for 5 minutes because they are extremely short, and you get a small epiphany. Oh, so that's how you open the border. And you can treat it as a library of different techniques and pick the source code from one episode and start your project there. I do it all the time. So it's useful mostly for people who program a bit on Commodore 64 or want to go step by step and learn to do it from scratch. But during those years, people told me that they want something more from 64 bytes, maybe a long form course that will tell them how to create a game from scratch, from the complete beginner level to a complete game that is released on the internet. And when I asked, all right, what kind of game? I got like hundreds of different answers. And it's hard to create one course or one program that will help every one of you to create your own game. And I was thinking, how could it be possible for me to scale the bottleneck, which is me, to solve this problem? And I decided to create a community of people who want to create games. And I did just that a couple of weeks ago. We started Creators Club. And our main idea is that we create cool stuff to keep old computers alive. In 2022, this year, we are focused on specifically creating games. And we are on track. The idea is that we will help you, we will support you, and we will keep you motivated and on track to actually starting working on it and releasing your game, hopefully this year. This community will never, people in this community will never make fun of your projects. We want you to succeed. We want to keep our beloved computer alive. And we have a ridiculously active community. Launched just 6 weeks ago, we already have 64 members, but 26 of them already work on game prototypes and 3 of them have games in progress. So those are today's stats from our Discord. We have this game development path where we take you from the idea to prototype to game in progress and then to release. And then once you ship the game, you bask in the glory. And we use simple tools to get things done. We use just Discord to talk asynchronously, and we meet from time to time on Zoom when we want to discuss things in person. We had one meeting a week ago, and we will continue to do that going forward. And I also use Zoom to meet with members one-on-one, and I'll tell you a bit more about that in a second. You can see for yourself. So this is our community. So we stay on Discord to discuss different ideas. So when you join us, you're welcomed here. Here you need to sign those rules that you will abide to our mottos, and then you can start here to get some idea out of what's happening. And you can treat it as a normal Discord server where you can chit chat, have some ideas how to improve it, have some general talks. You can ask for help whenever you need to configure your development environment when you get stuck. You can discuss basic assembly, game development, demos, music, art, and hardware, where you can ask about different things and also show your hardware prawn. And the most important part of this community is that we have this game development path. And this is just an idea to move you through this process of creating the game and use the Discord to facilitate that. So the idea is that we need to start with something. We need to start with a concrete idea. So we start with this channel where people post the different ideas for different games. and then we can work on that idea. We can make it more concrete. We can figure out exact first steps, how to get this idea, do that in practice. So for example, if you come up with an idea of a text adventure game, I should have it somewhere here. Oh no, this was posted in BASIC. Yeah, so Bill wanted to create a text adventure game, and he asked, he had an idea of what to do in that game. And right after posting this message, I get back to him and help him to figure out the first steps, what to do for the prototype of this game to move forward in a really tiny step forward. And from game ideas, when you have the concrete idea, you are allowed to go to the next stage and to post some prototypes. And here we have a pretty active community of people who are creating different prototypes for different games. This is the match-free game that is in the works. This is another stage of that game. Here we have a pet ski shooter, which started by displaying a static pet ski characters. And then here we have an animation. Here we have a demo for the graphics for another game. Here is a prototype of a graphic for a shoot 'em up. And here are the games that are actually in progress right now. So this is the match-free game that advanced from the prototype stage to the game in progress one. And as you can see, first it was displayed with like tiles created from characters, and now the person is working on images, and the game will be beautiful, will work, and it will probably be released pretty much soon. Oh no, sorry. I need to share the whole screen. Please ignore what I said just a minute before. I'll share the same thing I showed you before. Okay, sorry. This is what you were supposed to be seeing. This is our Discord server. So here's the welcome area. Here you can read the rules. Here's some info how to start. Here you can introduce yourself, and then you can roam around different channels and ask for help if you need it. Configure your environment, for example. Here you can ask for things related to BASIC, related with assembly. Here are our game dev discussions, and here are our channels that are focused on game development. So here are the rules. Only people with those roles can post on those channels, and the idea is that you go through these stages step by step, from idea through prototype to in progress. Then you work on releasing the game, and then you ship it, and that's it. Then you bask in glory. So here are some prototypes, or maybe even ideas. Here you talk about different ideas. For example, this person wants to create a demake of the parachute simulator they created. So once you post an idea, I or any other person in the community, I can tell you what are suggested first steps to move your idea forward, and then you go to the prototype stage, and then you can show our prototypes. So for example, this is the pet ski shooter, which started with just static displayed characters, and now it has an animation. This is the open world that already have some scrolling prototype and character graphics. This is Space Mariachi, which will be probably a shoot 'em up. And this is Triple Town demake, which started like that in the prototype. This is advanced prototype. And then the person added some additional features. And now they are working on graphics, and probably this game will be released soon. So this is what's happening in our community. So don't treat it as just let me show you this. So don't treat it as just a Discord server where you can discuss stuff and basically talk about different stuff related to Commodore 64. Think about it as a community that will help you achieve your dreams. So making games is hard. Like most common mistake is to start too big and never finish the game, or never even start working on the idea because it seems too scary. We will always help you to make small, tiny steps toward the victory. So we will help you, we will support you, and we will keep you motivated. And everybody who will not abide to those rules, who will be, I don't know, making fun of people or something like that, will be asked to leave our community. So we will strive to be really supportive for all the creators, and we want to be a place where you can actually create a game and be among other people who are working on making Commodore 64 alive. And you can join our community. You can become one of our next 64 creators. The idea is to have 1 kilobyte of creators, so to have more than 1,000 of people, but to do that gradually, to gradually expand our community, to find people who are who want the same things as we do, who want to be supportive, who want to be helpful, who want to create stuff and not just dream about creating stuff. So if you go to the website 64bytes.com/cc, you can join our community. And the price of admission for now, it's $9.99 per month, and that's the price for having a supportive community that will help you achieve your childhood dream. And this price is only until we reach 128 members. If you go to this website, you can see that if you refresh this website, you can see that we have 65 places left. We have 64 members right now. And you can join us either monthly or yearly. And once you join us, you will have this price freezed. So whenever the price gets higher, because we will constantly improving the community, new features will be added to the community. For example, right now we are meeting once a month on those group meetings. When we have more people in the community, I can make those meetings more regular. I can put more time into facilitating everything inside the community to help other people make presentations about their games, so we can have more events inside. We can learn not only from me, but from the other creators. So the community will grow, the community will be only better, and right now you have the opportunity to join us while we are still a bit small, but we are already pretty active, and you can take part in shaping this community. For example, right now we are working on figuring out the better name for the community, because like Creators Club is okay, but we can figure out something better, something that will resonate more with our actual members. So if you join us, you can take part into creating something that you will feel works for you, that you can be proud of, and you can be proud member and proud creator. So if that looks interesting to you, please join us or send me an email and I'll tell you a bit more about that. So that's it from me, and if you have more questions, I can answer them now. either about Commodore 64, programming it, or 64 bytes, or the Creators Club. Fire away. I'll write down my email, so if you want to ask me something, you can drop me a line. It's michal@64bytes.com, and I can tell you more about the community. So joining is pretty simple. If you click subscribe, you can pay by card or PayPal, I think. And then once you do, you will get a button to join our Discord server. It all happens automatically. You're invited, and you can join us, and you can work on your game from the day one. All right, any questions? I will look for questions in the comments, but if you have more than that, I will gladly answer them. And I also write the link to the community. It's 64bytes.com/cc, like Creators Club. All right. Yeah, sorry for this not showing the screen. And thank you for telling me. All right. Are there any questions? Yeah, so the one I answered before, can you make sure you send us their names, the demos I shown, so we can find them? Yes, I will send you an email tomorrow about those demos with slides, and slides contain all the names of the demos and the games, so you can find them later. Are there any games? Yes, in Duke Nukem you could look up and down, and you could be on different levels vertically, but every enemy was built with sprites and not real polygons. Stay a while, stay forever. Yeah, I love that game as well. Okay. Let's see. There was a really good discussion in the comments. All right. I don't see any questions either in the comments nor in the current ones. So if you have any questions regarding to this community, drop me a line at michal@64bytes.com, and I'll be happy to answer all of them. And remember, like, this price here is only available until we reach 128 subscribers. Once we do, the prices will go up, and we will add new features to the community. Every existing member will be awarded those features, and for the same price they were paying up till that point. Oh, there is one more thing I didn't mention. So right now we are rather small, and when we will grow, there will be some features that will be not available in our community. So one important thing that we do have right now, if you join our community and go to the Let's Talk in Person channel, you will find a link to a calendar when you can join a Zoom meeting with me and tell me a bit more about you, about your project, and I can help you figure out simplest possible steps to make this project going. So for example, Bill here wanted to create a text adventure game. He was the first person who took me up on the offer on giving this consultation. And in just 20 minutes, he got a couple of different steps that moved him forward to create the first game in basically in his life. So he's working on realizing his childhood dream, and you might also be one of those people. So the thing is, I won't scale. So when our community grows, I won't be able to offer those in-person meetings to everyone. But right now, that's pretty feasible. So I can meet with you if you join our community right now and book the meeting with me. And I can get you up to speed with what to do with your project to start. All right. Don't forget this link, and I hope to see you on the other side. See you soon.